Hi everybody. Welcome back. This is our panel discussion of two that we'll be having today. And I'm delighted to welcome and introduce the host of the event, who will introduce the panelists. So, Lars Markul is the host of the event. Many of you may have interacted with him or seen him before. And that's because he's been extremely prominent and active in the world of open banking, not just in Europe and Germany, where he's from, but also in India. He currently works at Weaver.io, a European banking as a service platform. So, Lars, over to you. And audience, please, can you keep a round of virtual applause going for the panelists? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Aryaman, for the kind words. I'm very excited to be part of this event here. As Aryaman mentioned, I'm based in Berlin, Germany. I've been working here in open banking since 7 years. I've gone through the whole cycle of PSD2. Have always been following what's going on in fintech India, specifically around the AA. So I'm extremely excited to see what's going on there, and I'm even more. And I'm pretty sure my fellow panelists are excited about everything what we're going to talk about now. So without further ado, let me introduce the 5 panelists that we are speaking here today. First of all, Mr. Anjani Rathur, who's the Chief Digital Officer at HDFC Bank. Then Mr. Anshuj Saryaya, the Business Head, Business Loans Direct at Bajaj Finserv. Mr. Bijit Bhaskar, who is the Head of Digital Banking Partnership and E-Commerce at ICICI Bank. And Mr. Ravesh Bhatnagar, who is the Senior Vice President and Head at Digital Banking at Indusland. And last but not least, Mr. Samir Shetty, who's the Head of Digital Business and Transformation at Axis Bank. So I really hope I didn't mispronounce any of your names, but I'm really excited to be speaking with you. And maybe to kick things off, let's start with a first personal note from your side. Why are you particularly excited about AA? What is probably your most favorite use case that you want to use around AA? And I would like to give each panelist a quick answer to this question, starting in the order that I introduced the people. So first, Mr. Anjani, what is your personal view on AA, and maybe what's the favorite use case that you're seeing coming up?
Well, I think it's going to help big time in credit underwriting. That's one of the use cases that we are looking at.
Sure. And like again, Mr. Anjani did it as I requested initially. Keep it very brief and very to the point. So thanks for that. Secondly, Mr. Anshuj Saryaya, what is your favorite use case? What you're seeing around AA?
So in terms of the use case that we're right now working with, would be invoice financing. As I said, lending would be the main use case to start off with, and invoice financing obviously has a large potential because it's a really underserved area of lending in the country at the moment, and A has most probably a very big role to play in this. So that's something that's really exciting for us to work on.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Mr. Bijit Bhaskar, what's your favorite use case that you are seeing?
More than the use case, I think it helps the customer ensure that his data is protected and his data can be used for a use case that he wants, and that use case could be any of the ones that have been mentioned or more. I think the power in the hands of the customer to make his life simple and to have a better customer journey, I think, is the biggest benefit.
To put the customer in the driver's seat basically is what's open banking in AA is really about. That's very true. Thank you for that. Mr. Ravesh Bhatnagar, what is your favorite use case that you are seeing?
See, for me, actually, I think it's two ends of the spectrum that are there. One is the wealthy side, which is the PFM, that if the customers want to do it on their own, it's a DIY journeys for them, as well as on an assisted model, right? So that is one major set of use cases. The other is, by the way, the micro lending side, which is the other end of the spectrum, ensuring that the bottom of the pyramid get better access to credit. So some of those making processes, servicing, collections, a lot of it easier. I think these are two specific spectrums.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And now, Mr. Samir Shetty, what's your favorite use case that you're seeing?
Thanks, Lars, and thanks the Saimati team for having me here. It's a privilege. So I've been involved with Saimati since the beginning, and I am very excited about the potential that this offers. And as Vijay said, use cases will come and go, but just the concept of data being the customer's property and not the institution's property, and democratizing data so that the customer can get the best use out of it for whatever they want to, and the entire world can come and now build various types of use cases. Is what excites me. People have spoken about lending. People have spoken about PFM. These are the first two obvious issues all of us are working on. But my belief is that this will do to financial management what UPI did to payments. And so that's what excites me about it.
Awesome, perfect. So to recap, after we heard all the 5 panelists giving their favorite use cases, as Samir has kind of summarized as well already, it's about lending, it's about PFM, but there's so much more similar development we have seen here in Europe as well. It kind of starts with the easy use cases and then goes a lot further. But yeah, let's focus a little bit more on the use cases, and I would like to start with Mr. Anju Sayar. You have mentioned invoicing financing as your favorite use case, and I'm guessing everything around lending is a big use case that a lot of people are talking around AA. What do you think is crucial for customer adaptation of these services, and how fast do you think the population will be able to adapt to this new flow of data sharing?
Sure. So this will be dependent on a variety of factors. To be honest, I think the main 2 factors would be, one, the kind of use cases that come up. Now, all of us at the start obviously have certain use cases in mind because that's what we have all worked on or thought about. But that doesn't mean that's where the use cases will end. New use cases will keep coming up, and it'll all depend on consumers coming onto the AA ecosystem, depending on how exciting the use cases are for them and how useful are they. I mean, we've already seen it in UPI. The way it's got socialized is because of multiple players coming in and making it a pretty seamless process. Government started it, but then left it to the private players to get in and build that up, which included, let's say, a Phone Pay, Google Pay, all of these. And that's really moved the needle there. The other side would be obviously the banks and the large FIPs. How fast do they come onto the A platform? Because right now it's just a start, but there are multiple players that need to be on the A ecosystem for it to work really seamlessly and work on a large scale. And how well do they socialize it within their customer base? Finally, that is what's going to determine the pace of adoption. It'll take some time to build this completely, but what's great is that the first 2 steps have been taken, and now it's something that will hopefully take a life of its own. And as more and more use cases keep coming up, more and more consumers will start getting onto it faster. In terms of ease, obviously it's quite easy. So and nowadays consumers are quite digital savvy, so it'll not be process space, it'll be not too difficult. It'll just be a case of how interesting and useful do the consumers find the A ecosystem, and how fast do the FIPs really get onto it.
So basically, how much value we as an ecosystem are able to provide to consumers, that will basically determine the speed of those consumers adapting. Yeah, thanks for that. I'll continue with Mr. Anjani Rathur. I mean, we spoke now a little bit already about like how fast and what will determine how fast those consumers will adapt. But specifically looking now at the things are going today, like for example, looking at lending or even other use cases, the current way of data sharing is very often like very complicated. Do you think like once a consumer has tried the AA, they will never be able to go back, or what do you think will be crucial in that adaptation?
So it should be like that it should be so simple to use that consumers may not find a better proposition anywhere else as far as data sharing is concerned. So therefore, it's very important for all of us to ensure that the customer experience is so good that a customer comes onto a particular digital property or to any of the entities to get a particular requirement served, and in the whole process is able to register and share information very safely with the entities. Now, this is to be as simple as transferring money through API or UPI as it is happening today. I mean, what the UPI did to money transfer, this has got the capability to do the same for lending, at least to begin with, and then to other use cases. So it has to be very simple. If it's more complicated compared to what it is today, then it will be difficult to drive adoption. But the way we are going, we are already looking at signs of simplicity and ease and convenience for our customers here.
Yeah, I think that goes very much along with what Mr. Sen said also in his keynote. At the end of it, we really have to focus on providing the value, the benefits to the consumer, and make it easy for the consumer so he or she can use it. Thanks, Anjani. Now continue with Bijit Bhaskar. I mean, in the initial round of use cases, we spoke about lending, but we also spoke about PFM. I think you didn't mention it, but I think in one of the pre-discussions that we had, you mentioned lending and PFM as the first few use cases. Also, obviously here in Europe, PFM has been a big driver of open banking. However, there are always a lot of challenges around PFMs, and there are also some people who have some concerns or not concerns, but doubt how big PFM can actually be. What is your view on that, and how can maybe AA even support new use cases around PFM?
I think it's, if you ask me, you're right. The two big use cases are either lending or, the PFM story. And if you ask me, there have been, the Indian banks, I think, have been trying to do PFM for some time now. But the biggest challenge was, how do you try and aggregate all the information from different banks and different bank accounts? I think this AA will make that very, very simple. And wherever the customer actually decides whichever service that he decides to use, or whichever bank he decides to use, or whichever financial institution he decides to use, by just just like how when UPI payment happens, now actually he will be able to share his bank statements of different banks and get a consolidated picture of all his financial holdings. Now it could be a simple his own savings account, it could be a current account, it could be his loan statement, it could be any of those things, and he can actually draw up his balance sheet. He can do a spend analysis. He can see as to what his investments are. The ability for him actually to use PFM will unfold as AA starts becoming more and more popular. And therefore, I think it's a very, very powerful tool. I think it also gives an opportunity for various startups and various other financial institutions to actually, drive this as a product on a standalone basis, because the opportunities and the options are immense. I think that is something which will really it's got a scope not only to make it more meaningful to the customer, but also I think it's got a great opportunity for revenue streams for the banks, as well as probably for many more startups to come into this area.
Great. Have you heard about a few startups already, like going after this PFM challenge specifically around AA? I mean, looking at the international landscape
yes.
In the US, you see
there are
also
already, in fact, when we did the hackathon a couple of months back, I think the number of entities who actually are building models around these were very encouraging, and there are many interesting use cases. I'll just add a few, one more. When we think of PFM, we actually only think more from an individual perspective. But I think there is a very big use case even for small entities, SME businesses, etc., because they also need some of these functionalities, because it becomes then easier for them to file their returns, to give it to their chartered accountants, etc. And it also sometimes is a good use case to actually find out whether the transaction which the customer claims is done has actually happened or not happened, and he can consolidate it in one place. So there are many interesting use cases which will actually unfold, and we saw that when we did that hackathon. So I think it will be interesting days.
I mean, I fully agree with you. Actually, in my past life, working in open banking here in Europe, we have also organized, I think, 7 or 8 fintech hackathons, open banking hackathons in Germany and Austria and Czech Republic. And very often you kind of go with the same mindset. There is going to be like the same use cases. And then there are always at least a couple of use cases that completely like blow your mind and go kind of maybe take an existing approach, existing PFM approach, and just kind of twist it a little bit more, going with a certain trend and making it a lot more interesting. So I have to fully agree with you that PFM itself might be a good entry point, but also the adaptation of different PFM functionalities.
Even for a bank, it's an interesting use case, because now you actually can try and see as to how you can make the customer primary, because you can try and actually offer a single view, of all his transactions. So it's a good use case for the bank as well, and not just for the other.
Yeah, fully agree. Coming now to Mr. Ravesh Bhatnagar, when I'm over here in Germany and talking to people about the fintech landscape in India, I'm always like very excited what's happening in India. A lot of people don't have so much understanding what's going on in fintech in India, but I think the unique piece here is often everything around the fintech infrastructure, like how much has been done in the last couple of years, starting with Aadhaar, going over all the different kind of development, and now AA is happening. So what I'm particularly wondering about, seeing so many open banking AA use cases in Germany, in Europe, and the rest of the world, will we see maybe something particular specific in India, which is maybe different and or not really happening in other countries because either infrastructure or maybe even consumer demand is completely different. So will we see completely new use cases here in India?
Yeah, so maybe just taking a step back for all our community which is already out there. I'm sure majority of us already know what is the difference between the Europe implementation and India. But just to lay out that point before stating,
please
answering your question. See, one of the big things that is happening in Europe is that a lot of use cases initially were towards KYC and compliance, which, by the way, India is already over the hump because of the Aadhaar infrastructure, which is already in place, and the entire JAM Trinity, which was established 3-4 years back after demonetization. So we are already past that hump. So that is one major difference that will be, and will be starting at least a step forward compared to where Europe started. The other key difference, by the way, is that a lot of the banking and the non-banking players who are a part of the AA ecosystem, they are the ones who will actually end up having access to the data. Unlike Europe, where AAs also have access to the data. So I think these are two major differences that are there. Having said that, in terms of at least the use cases that will be very specific to India and maybe some similar geographies going forward, will be around, at least micro lending is a big bit, right? That's something that will help not just in ensuring that how well are you transferring the funds? Are you doing your due diligence really well? Because now you have access to at least accounts. Also, it will help in the collections part of it, right? Which is a major challenge that you see in India. So that micro lending from sourcing to actually giving the actual loan to collection, I think that will be a big prevalent use case, aiming to ensure that we alleviate the entire bottom of the pyramid category. That will be the big thing that I think. Number two will be the emergence of better assisted models. Till now, the Indian banking industry, when you talk about one of the segments, whether it is wealth or even the affluent or the mass affluent, they have typically relied on the RMs to know the true potential of the customer. You only know what you have within the bank. Now, with the democratizing the entire data, you are actually now becoming more system dependent rather than a person dependent. And hence, you will see a lot of new assisted models also emerging and taking precedence. And the banks will be now much more, the relationships that they can establish is going to be at a very, very different level. So I think these are at least a couple of them that I can think about upfront. Obviously, servicing, that will be something that customers will get benefited from, because a lot of the documentation that will exist, a lot of the insights on the other account will be available. So at the end of the day, customers are going to get empowered. But I think if you take micro lending, the assisted model prevalence, and the servicing and collection, I think these are what are going to help go at least take India forward and make it very different from what has already happened in Europe.
Thank you. I mean, that sounds indeed like a place where maybe India can also show the rest of the world in what direction AA and account aggregation can go. Next one is Samir Shetty. I want to ask a question to you. So I think we have now in the last month or even years, there was a lot of talking around AA. Finally is coming now for the implementation. It's finally going live. What do you think? Like, what are your personal expectations for the next 2 months, or let's say the short frame of the next couple of months? What will be the next milestones, and what will we see, and what are you excited around about that?
Sure. So I think I'm watching for three milestones in the next 2 months. The first is for a reasonably large part of the Indian financial services ecosystem to become FIU, so that they are in the entire ecosystem. So that will be one big milestone. The second one is for the first set of use cases to come out on the FIP side, so that there is some usage and we can see a set of interesting things happening. And the third, which maybe actually precedes for actually the account aggregators to go live and to kind of start enrolling customers and start getting them into using services. So these are the three big milestones I think in the next 2 months. But having said that, I think this is the journey, right? And I don't think we should expect miracles.
I think Samir.
Yes, can you hear me?
I think we lost the connection with Samir here. I'm still audible, right?
Yeah, I can hear you. So if the audience, can you hear Samir? If you just send the thumbs up emoji, then we will continue. Yeah, awesome. Looks like the audience can hear. So sorry, Samir, please carry on.
Sure. No, I was saying that we should not expect miracles in 2 months. This is very much like we overestimate what we can achieve in 2 months and underestimate what we can achieve in 2 years. I think this is classically in that bucket. So there is, I think, a lot of work to be done in terms of making this customer centric, making the journeys smooth, and ensuring adoption and so on and so forth. And I think we should not burden ourselves with great expectations, but in a purposeful manner work towards it so that it can really become distinctive in the next year or so.
Yeah, I think this typical quote of like you shouldn't like overestimate what you can do in the next 2 months, but underestimate in the next couple of years is, I think, very true. But still, it sounds pretty exciting the next couple of months as well. What is coming on? What's coming about around AA? I actually want to come back to Ravesh because actually you mentioned something quite interesting, or like in the previous answer around the fintech landscape infrastructure in India. You mentioned the non-banking players entering the space. So I think what we're seeing a lot on the international markets, even in India, but also in other countries, is everything around embedded banking, where more and more players outside of the financial service industry are starting to offer financial services. I mean, we have seen Shopify, Uber, and all these kind of examples doing something in fintech, in banking, and payment. So I'm actually wondering what will be the adaptation of AA in India? Will it be like, will we see a lot of use cases also coming from, let's say, in the tech industry, from industry outsiders, or will it be like mostly focused on the financial service industry players who will be the service providers?
So I'll keep I think the answer short. I think I personally see a lot of the non-banking players bringing a lot of innovation. The other day, I saw a couple of food delivery startups asking PFM questions, and that were leading to answers. So I think a lot of innovation is going to be driven by the non-banking players. But what will be helpful is whichever bank and the financial institution which is able to follow a fast follower strategy, I think they will be able to deliver scale, because you require, it's a good mix of innovation from the non-banking players and maybe the fast follower strategy, or maybe innovation from a few banking players delivering the scale. I think that's what I foresee happening in the next, let's say, 5 to 6 months at least. First set of use cases which will get implemented, and whichever bank also is able to deliver some of these faster, scale will be delivered by the banks.
Sure. I mean, I think there's this famous quote as well from Andreessen Horowitz, or from Angela Strange, the partner at Andreessen Horowitz. Every company will be a fintech company at one point. Maybe it's not that extreme, but I would definitely see more adoption of fintech services, fintech integrations into different services. Now I'm going to come back to Samir Shetty again and talk a little bit about like my experience over here in Europe. I mean, I think I joined the open banking development in Europe around 2013. I think that was the first time I heard about PSD2. Now fast forward is 2020. Still PSD2 is implemented in Europe, but it's still not where it should be. So it kind of feels like, for me, somebody working on the startup side, it takes forever. This is unfortunately often the case in banking on regulation, or maybe it's also required. But actually, when I'm looking at the development in India, from what I've seen, I would say it went a lot faster than I would have expected. So I was wondering, like, what are your thoughts? Like, what do you think, why it went maybe a little bit faster in India than in other countries? Or maybe it's just like my biased view. What is your thought on that?
Sure. So firstly, that was my son in the background. A little bit, so I hope that's fine.
Sure.
I think coming back to the topic, I think India in general has taken a very public infrastructure approach to many of these things, and I think that's perhaps what's helped build some stuff at scale, right? So even PSD2 as an example, while the regulations are central, but the implementation is very bank specific, and the standard, there are no set standards and so on and so forth, which is kind of resulting in the issues in Europe, right? Whereas account aggregator, on the other hand, there are a very clear set of standards, there are very clear set of to-dos and not to-dos and so on and so forth. And institutions who want to be part of the ecosystem basically adapt these standards. And I think hence my sense is that we will see better adoption and better institutional scale as far as account aggregation is concerned in India. Having said that, as I said, these are a little bit more complicated use cases compared to UPI and payments use cases, which are, while they are complicated, they are reasonably straightforward. These are more complicated. Even the data, every bank has its own data format and so on and so forth. So we have to purposefully invest. We have to be aware that results may come a little bit down the line. We should not expect immediate results. And all of us jointly need to purposefully invest behind this to make this a success.
I think that's a great statement. Kind of believe in the power of open banking and don't expect like results tomorrow or the day after. Now I'll actually address a question to Anshuj Saharia. I think we've talked a lot about use cases already. Also, you mentioned the use case of small merchant businesses was mentioned already. So over here again, like in Europe, where at the beginning everything started with consumers and then kind of at one point transitioned more to use cases focusing, let's say, on smaller SMEs, freelancers. I'm actually wondering, like, where do you see like a bigger impact of AA, maybe short term, but also long term? Is it more like on the consumer side, or is it more on the small merchant business side?
Well, Lars, I believe the impact will be across the spectrum because there will be different use cases for different set of customers. Consumers, for example, PFM, etc., might end up becoming a pretty big use case on the consumer side. And also lending itself will be quite a big use case for consumers. But what will happen on the small merchants and business, that it might have a larger impact in the shorter period. Reason being that currently, even in the lending spaces, the processes around lending to small merchant businesses are pretty time consuming. They're quite paper heavy and documentation heavy. And this primarily because of lack of true and accurate source of information that is available to the FIs to underwrite customers in this space. This gets solved with the A coming into a very large extent with multiple data sources balance sheet information, which gives an idea about the cash flow, the GSTN information that's coming in. And as somebody mentioned earlier, the capability of monitoring post lending to the customer. That obviously is going to build a lot of confidence for the lenders to really start addressing this segment a little bit more aggressively. So the processes exist in terms of in the current ecosystem without A. Also on the consumer side, there's still processes that exist of trying to do a complete end-to-end digital journey or try to do it as paperless as possible. But these challenges exist on the small merchant and businesses side, which to a large extent I have a feeling with A coming in, and as and when the scope keeps growing for it, that particular problem will start getting addressed. So a real impact, as people have already mentioned, even in micro lending side, that's something that might help. And besides micro lending, just for MSME also, that can be a pretty big use case. So I see a short-term impact-wise, small merchant businesses really having a big impact by using A, but it's going to happen across the spectrum, to be honest.
So great. So at the end of it, everybody can benefit of it, but of course it might depend on the use case and the pain points a certain customer groups are having.
Yeah.
Now I want to address a question to Mr. Anjani Ratu, and that's something I'm particularly excited about as well around AA. I mean, again, PSD2 was a great concept at the beginning, but I think one of the biggest limitations around PSD2 was always the focus on payment accounts in the financial service industry. Now with AA in India, we're looking at a broad range of industry, not just at one type of account, of like different type of accounts, financial accounts, but not just bank accounts, but also other industries. So I, from a use case perspective, thinking there is so much more music that can be done with these kind of data sources. I'm wondering, like, what's your point of view, like, kind of making all these data sources available to the third parties, and are there specific industries that you are looking particularly forward to get access to data?
So data is actually a prerogative of the citizen of the country. So it belongs to the citizen, and therefore the citizen should be allowed to use the data in a manner in which he or she actually chooses to. And therefore, while we are starting this entire initiative with financial services, it should not stop here. It should continue to be extended to, let's say, telecom data, which is available in abundance. Healthcare at some point of time may follow the same framework. In fact, what we are doing here is It's transformational in a way that we are setting a framework here for exchanging data in a safe and secure manner. And the citizen has 100% control with transparency. And if this framework works properly, is robust, it can be scaled across for sharing data. In fact, that's one of the most precious commodities for future. And this is going to be a good way to safely and securely exchange data. So this is just the beginning. We have not even seen the tip of the iceberg yet.
Fully agree with that as well. I mean, I'm particularly looking forward to or quite curious to see somebody who is using financial data and combine it with other kind of data. As you mentioned, now healthcare, maybe insurance data. There might be some interesting use cases happening as well once you're able to connect to multiple data providers and not just limited to one. I'm guessing this could be a great theme for a hackathon as well to see what the potential is around there.
Yes, sir.
Now coming to Bijit, I think we spoke about the next couple of months already, like in what direction it's going. What do you think? I mean, we said as well we shouldn't overestimate what's maybe possible in a day, in a week, a month, or something like this. But what do you think is like a realistic time frame to give ourselves to kind of make a maybe first judgment in what direction it's going? I know it's a very hard question and maybe very hard to answer in that regards. But obviously, I know it here as well in Europe. There are people at one point making judgments, nonetheless. So maybe rather put a realistic time frame on that to make it at a point where it actually makes sense.
So anyway, since it's crystal glazing, I can I can give any answer. There's no right or wrong answer, I guess. So, but I think I think a fair time frame for an adoption and for this actually to become meaningful in the ecosystem, I think would be anywhere between 24 to 36 months, because it also depends on as to who the FIP will be, who the FIU will be, how much of all of this AA is being used in the customer journey. How much you are actually educating the customer on as to how he should be setting up his AA account, how he could share data, and how that particular usage of data is actually going to help him. So, if we take UPI as an example, in spite of the fact that we had a demon moment immediately after UPI got launched, we had a lot of big, fintech players who actually were driving the usage. We still found that actually by the time it really took off, it was still close to 18 to 24 months. So we are hoping that such similar moments will happen here as well, because there'll be good use cases that will come, and I think it'll all depend on as to how closely the entire industry will work, and how we build those customers' journeys so that customer actually uses this particular facility for their own advantage, and as to how both FIU and FIP will use it. So I think a fair time frame would be anywhere between 24 to 36 months for it to be really meaningful.
Yeah, I think that. I mean, as I said, there's just no right or wrong. It's a guess. Yeah. I think it's definitely fair to say that we should be giving like something like 24 plus months to the ecosystem to develop, because again, if you're kind of expecting fast, quick results, we might aim for the wrong direction. But if it's like a fair 2 to 3 years, including some education of consumers, but also education of companies out there who might make use of AA, that could be great. Great time frame. Thanks. I mean, I think we're coming out a little bit to the end, or we're coming to the end of the panel discussion, but I want to make use of the chance and kind of ask each of you to kind of give a short closing statement. I think we talked now a lot about AA, about potential use cases, of potential problems, or in what direction it could be going. So maybe to summarize the discussion from your point of view in 2 to 3 sentences, what are your thoughts around AA? Why are you thinking it could be or it will be a great impact for Indian consumers? And why is it important for you as a bank as well? And I would like to do it in the reverse order of the introduction. So starting with Samir Shetty, what's your final statement, closing statement?
So I think account aggregator is a very critical component in the digital infrastructure that India is building, and it enables consumers to take charge of their own data, and hence it will be quite fundamental to how the country progresses from here. As an institution and as an individual, I'm quite excited because of what this will do to the digital future of the country. It is really big. In my mind, it is as big or perhaps even bigger than UPI in terms of what benefits it can bring. And hence, I think also we should hence be mindful to really invest, nurture the baby, and ensure that it turns into something that truly delivers distinctive performance. and not a nice show horse that in 2-3 months we run behind it and then we get tired and we move on to the next thing. So it's important that we nurture this, and that's my request to everybody. But I think this is quite fundamental.
Great, bigger than UPI. No pressure for the ecosystem. Huh? Thanks for that. Next one, Ravesh.
So I think I'm very personally excited about the customer empowerment that AA is going to provide. At least what I actually think is a matured AA framework, by the way, will not only make banking simple, by the way, for our customers and other banks' customers, but eventually, right, once the health and the telco ecosystems are in place, will make life simple for the customer. I think that's my final thought.
Indeed. Thanks, Ravesh. Bijit?
Yeah, I think there are three things which, if you ask me, are very, very exciting in this. The first is that today for existing customers, we have a great journey. We have one-click loans, etc. I think this will just enable to ensure that any new to bank customer can actually get a similar experience. But especially after KYC has been digitized with the video KYC, I think this was the last leg that was left, and I think that therefore that should make it very, very meaningful. The second thing is that I think it helps drive the cost of actually doing credit and building some of these products much very, very, very low, which therefore helps the banks or anybody who is using this data to actually build small microcredit end-use loans for the benefit of the customer. So I think it really drives the cost down, and therefore you can do that. And the third one I think is that by using this data, actually you can build great financial solutions for the customers. You can actually give great insights and therefore actually help create a good financial journey for the customers. So I think if you ask me, these three things are really very exciting, and it's a great set of products that complete the product suite that the customers can get from a bank.
Thank you, Bijit. Next one, Anshul.
Yeah. So I guess one of the biggest things that once it matures, what it'll end up doing is, and what's really exciting is, it'll provide a level playing field to all the players in the industry. I mean, starting from the smallest fintechs to the biggest banks. Obviously, at that point of time, it most probably is going to raise questions about who really owns the customer. Because the power will now move on to the hand of the customers, because he has perfect information in terms of providing information. Who does he want to provide information to, and whether he's getting the best offer is something that he'll be able to really check and drive on their own. So the power really firmly moves into the hand of the customer, and at the same time, it will still provide a lot of opportunities for all the players in the industry to explore new business models and business avenues, and to really rethink on their existing processes. So it's going to force everybody to really evolve. As I said at the start, maybe why the reason why we said that I'm excited about invoice financing is because that's a big gap. That particular product doesn't really exist in the country, and with the MSMEs, credit is a very large gap. And the existing products, for example, in the market that we tend to provide to MSMEs are not really sometimes what they want. Product like term loans, overdraft, etc., are collateral-based products, which most of the MSMEs are not in a situation to provide. So what ends up having is they end up taking products which they don't really want, which might be short-term cash flow lending. Things like invoice financing, which will get powered by the AA network ecosystem, is really going to start making life easier for the customer, get them the correct products, as well as provide large business opportunities for the FIs and for the other players in the market. So all in all, it can have a really large impact. Now, how it shapes up is obviously might be a little bit of a journey, but it really has all the large potential to be a game changer, as Mr. Sen said.
Indeed, a game changer. And now, thank you for that. And now, last but not least, Anjani, your closing statement.
So I think A is a good idea. The time has come for this idea, and it's inevitable. We just need to ensure that we are solving some real world problems for our customers using this, and traction is going to come through. Rather than focus on too many things, if we just focus on experience and one or two good problem solving, this will bring a lot of traction in the market for this particular program. So good luck to everybody who's participating in this program. It's a fantastic idea, good collaboration. The more we share, the more we will gain in this world like this. So let's see how quickly we can make this a reality.
Thank you. Was indeed a very, very good closing statement. And I think when I summarize the panel discussion that we had now, it's really about focusing on the consumer, putting the consumer in the driver's seat and making him or her choose the service they want to use, focus on the problems. And when we all do that, then AA will be a success. So yeah, I thank you all for this very, very interesting discussion. I'm just looking at the time. We overran. This happens when you talk about exciting things and exciting development. So sorry for the delay, but I hope everybody enjoyed the discussions and looking forward to the next slots.
Thank you so much, Lars, and all of our panelists. That was an amazing discussion. I'm not sure if you can see me or hear me. Okay, now it seems that you can. There's a quote by Victor Hugo which says that nothing is more powerful than an idea whose time has come. And judging by what our panelists have said, it seems like the time for account aggregation is now. So we're really excited to see what happens. We'd like to take a quick break before the next panel. But once again, thank you so much to Lars, Ravish, Anshuj, Bijit, Samir, and Anjani. Thank you so much. Could we please have a round of virtual applause? Really amazing to see how all the ecosystem players have come together to really collaborate and push this ecosystem together and nurture it, as Samir said. So thank you once again, and please stay tuned, audience. We'll be back in a moment with a show and tell demonstration of account aggregator apps in action. So please stay tuned.